Hello, today our topic is spiritual enlightenment. And this is the first of a series of videos on spiritual astrology. And the first thing I want to do is describe the kinds of experiences that we will be studying. In a future video in this series, probably around the third video, I'm going to get into the details of what is involved in these spiritual experiences. And specifically, we're going to look at the transits. In other words, where the planets are in the sky in relationship to someone's birth chart when someone experiences these kinds of things. And I've listed the kinds of experiences that I have researched and we're going to be learning about the astrology that's involved when someone has these kinds of experiences, such as feelings of infinite love, waves of cosmic bliss, a feeling of oneness with everything, or seeing light in everything, or a vision of a higher dimensional being such as a saint or an angelic being, or a connection beyond this life so that any fear of death or anxiety dissolves in transcendental bliss, or any other sudden elevation of thought, feelings, awareness, and perception beyond the immediate sensory experiences and beyond the little concerns of our lives. So some people will occasionally, it might be very rare, be taken on this wave of feeling and an elevated sensitivity. What is happening astrologically when this happens? That's the question I'm going to answer. But before I tell you what I found, I first want to go over some of the common ideas. Because as I go into the details of what I found when people are having these experiences, and what I found is also built on the findings of other people as well. But as I go into it, you're likely to start asking, well, what about this? What about that? Okay, so let me address those things now. Very often, what an astrologer thinks of at the time of a spiritual experience is Neptune. At least modern Western astrologers do. The transiting Neptune, in other words, where Neptune is in the sky at the time the person has the experience, and also the natal Neptune. Also, when we think about houses, the 12th house is often associated with spirituality in both modern Western and Vedic astrology, and sometimes the 8th house. We also sometimes think about Pisces. And in addition to Neptune, planets like Uranus or the moon, we think of as sometimes getting involved. And in Vedic astrology, Jupiter and the 9th house are often associated with high spiritual development. And there are also specific planetary combinations associated with spirituality. These are called yogas. Yoga just in astrology just means combination of planets, such as the Pancha Mahapurusha Yoga or the Muni Yoga. Okay, so these are some of the things that we think about. Now, there's something going on that we take for granted. It's an instinctive, implicit assumption that we very often don't articulate. And that is that we have this foundation in our lives, like a pyramid, this big base where we're grounded. We're grounded in the material world and we aspire upwards. It's the assumed model for how we think about spirituality. So we have the earth, this solid base, and then the other elements which are less tangible and have to do with emotions and thinking and energy and leading us all up into the most rarefied and sublime level of spirit. So we have these arrows pointing up from our foundation in the material world as we aspire upwards. And also, when you think of houses, in modern Western astrology, the second house is often related to possessions, to things, to property, to money, the most material, down to earth house. And it kind of spirals around. You're in the first quadrant where the second house is. Then you get over to the fifth house in the next quadrant, more creative, more expressive. Then the eighth house in the next quadrant sometimes opens the door to spirituality, opens the door to life after death. To death and whatever may happen after death, and then into the last quadrant and the final house, the 12th house, which is considered often to be the big door open into the spiritual realm. And similarly, you can think of the planets, Venus and Mars at the lowest level, the most physical, the most uh, somatic, like bodily, the organic, material planets, and then spiraling upwards into less personal, more transcendental influences from planets like Uranus and Neptune. So I want to go over this because I want to put it in perspective, because what I'm going to be showing as we move forward in these future videos in this series, that there's another way to think about spirituality in relationship to astrology. Now, another thing that often comes to mind when we think of astrology and spirituality is, again, thinking of the houses, some houses, as being portals out of the physical into the spiritual realm. So here we have a Monopoly board. So I happen to be an American. If you grew up in America, you're probably familiar with Monopoly. I don't know how popular it is in other countries, but Monopoly is a game where you throw the dice and you have a little piece and you move it around. And the object of Monopoly seems to be to own everything and become fabulously wealthy. Everybody else owns nothing and they're poor. Maybe not such a good image to be indoctrinating our children with, but that's the idea of monopoly. And then in this style of the Vedic chart wheel, we have a very similar idea, only you have multiple pieces. You have the sun, you have moon, you have Mercury, and they are placed in particular places. So it's a remarkably similar image. And the idea in Vedic astrology is, again, your pieces, the planets, moving through this board, we could think of it, through the chart wheel, with the different life experiences. Only the idea in Vedic astrology is not that you'll own everything and make everybody else poor. Actually, what the goal is to get off the board, get off the wheel, and get spiritual liberation or moksha. So notice that the 12th house and also the 8th house are difficult houses. They're called Dushtana houses in Vedic astrology. They're also difficult houses, particularly the 12th house, in modern Western astrology. So the idea is we're firmly planted in the physical world, and then we aspire upwards, but it's a tricky process. If we go back to our pyramid, as you go higher and higher, you get to the top. Oh my gosh, you can fall off. So, it's a gradual climb, and then you're in this precarious situation where many things can go wrong as you aspire upwards. And the things that are good for the spiritual life are often not so good for the material life. So these are some of the ideas. Not that every astrologer agrees with every one of these ideas or employs all of them, but these are some of the common views that we have in astrology. So to summarize, we have two interrelated ideas. One is from the dense, stable, and earthly world of Venus and Mars, Earth sign, second house, etc. We can aspire to the rarefied, imaginary, flighty, sacrificing, selfless levels of Neptune in the 12th house. And a related idea is that there are doorways out of the material world, such as the 12th house. And these doorways are often bad for material life, but good for the spiritual life. It's more complex than that, and many other things can happen, but these are some of the basic concepts that we often use. Now, I'm going to challenge. I'm going to challenge some of these assumptions. Number one, is the material world so solid, so safe, so secure? Well, from the point of view of physics, it's really not. So consider that solid things feel solid to us. You know, my table, your house, I can clap my hands feel like they're solid. So physical things feel like they're solid, they look solid, but actually when you clap your hands or you touch anything, the actual molecules never touch. It's the force fields around them that are bumping up against each other. And all these solid things, like we think of that base of the pyramid being so solid, actually the physical world is over 99.9999% space. So the protons and the neutrons that are in the center of an atom are so tiny, and the electrons are so tiny, it's almost all space. And also, think about our solar system. If you took the sun and the planets, Mercury, Venus, Mars, and so on, and you scaled them to put them on a football field or a soccer field, how big would the sun be? How big would the earth be? The sun would be about the size of a light bulb. The earth would be about the size of a marble. And the asteroids are so tiny, they're smaller than fleas. It's almost all space. Whether you're looking at the very, very tiny level of molecules, or you're looking at the solar system, or you're looking at the distances between solar systems and the distances between galaxies, it's mostly space at every level. So it appears to be solid. It appears to be impenetrable. I cannot walk through a wall. But it's really not, because there's so much stuff, physical things. It's because of these force fields. Okay, so that's just interesting. As I build this up, it gets more convincing, but that's just the first thought about this. Okay, now it gets crazier and crazier the more we look at what things are. Because those electrons that are on the outside of the molecules and they are responsible for the way that things interact, the way hydrogen combines with oxygen to make water or anything, those electrons are vitally important. What are these electrons? Well, initially you think of them as like little dots, and the dot, like little, like my fingers, intersecting something stable and solid. But when the scientists study the electrons, they're bizarre. So let me read this little quote from a website. Quantum mechanics proves that particles obey neither locality nor at least physical realism. The electron by its very nature is neither here nor there. It is not strictly bounded by location or momentum. This electron's not even really like a thing. It's like a spread out wave potential. Its reality is blurred into the realities of other particles. And here I put in quote, there is no physically real electron hidden somewhere. So the mathematics and the observations in science work. When we try to visualize what it is we're actually seeing, it's really impossible to conceptualize. So this is not the only way of interpreting what scientists are seeing and what the formulas tell us, but it's pretty close. There's something that we cannot really understand in the human mind. It's some kind of bizarre reality. So the electron cloud is both empty and full, a startling and peculiar state of being that is foreign to most of us scientific minds, but it is intimately understood by those, for example, well versed in Zen Buddhism. To understand this state of being, we will need to transcend the way we think. deductive reasoning so practically useful and sharply honed in the minds of physicists gets us a part way to understanding the electron. Oh, my point is the physical world is not this safe, solid place. There isn't much of it, and what's there is very strange. Another thing, arguably even stranger, is that the particles appear and disappear. They're moving in and out uh, of being like tangible, not even completely tangible, but semi-tangible things. So let me read this other and another quote from another website. Quantum field theory tells us that space is composed of fundamental quantum fields, with a separate field for every particle that makes up our universe. Electrons, quarks, neutrinos, and other fundamental particles are just the oscillations of the field with different energies. So what's primary are these oscillating fields. The quantum field gently vibrates randomly. Sometimes this produces enough energy to form particles out of seemingly nothing. The particles arising out of fluctuation of quantum fields are called virtual particles. Empty space is teeming with these virtual particles or wiggles in the field. It's a bizarre reality. Okay, but you may be thinking, okay, you know, I've heard about quantum theory before. It's mysterious. It has all this non-local meaning things interact simultaneously with one particle interacts simultaneously with other particles. There's this invisible realm. There's all these crazy things going on. But that's just at that level. I'm not living at that tiny, tiny level. Here I am with my table and walls and a floor and trees and my car, and everything's very solid. That doesn't really relate directly, and you might think the earth element is still this nice secure thing. Well, it's recently been discovered that we do operate at the quantum level. And let me read this second paragraph on this slide. Biologists discovered that one of the ways that birds know how to migrate from one location to another is through the process of quantum entanglement occurring within the eye of the bird. So we all know birds migrate. It's very mysterious. How do they know how to travel sometimes thousands of miles to a very particular spot? So he's been hypothesized they have these kind of magnets and so on. Well, now we know, in addition to whatever magnets they may have in their eyes or bodies or whatever, there is quantum entanglement going on in the eye of the bird. Quantum entanglement is this one of these crazy things at the subatomic level where you can have an atom on one side of the earth, another one on the other side of the earth, and they're interacting, affecting each other simultaneously, faster than the speed of light. That reality is not local. Everything is instantly connected to everything else. It's like all one in a very real sense. And that is going on in the eye of the bird. So the bird is able to sense where everything is simultaneously. It senses, it doesn't have to physically see it. And we have quantum entanglement going on inside of us and probably all living things. So quantum entanglement, these mysterious magical forces of nature that go beyond simple linear cause and effect relationships, are going on in living things. Birds are magical beings and we are magical beings. That's the fact. And this research on the quantum biology is going on at major universities. So it's not some fringe theory. It's mainstream science, very well validated by careful experiments. So here's a quote from a YouTube video called "The Secrets of Quantum Physics: Let There Be Life." It's a wonderful video. on this. I'll just read this very, very quickly because it's so exciting and interesting. The idea is called quantum entanglement. It involves particles that seem to communicate faster than the speed of light, as I just said. In recent years, extremely delicate experiments have shown that subatomic particles really are entangled. They really are. It's been validated. It means that they can suddenly and instantaneously influence each other across space. And now it seems that the same thing is going on in the robin's eye. When a photon enters the robin's eye, it creates what's called an entangled pair of electrons. In quantum entanglement, the electrons are mysteriously linked. It seems that the mysterious connection is the ultimate secret of the quantum robin's compass. These experiments are real and verifiable, and that even though I am seeing them with my own eyes, I still find it hard to believe. This is one of the scientists talking. You know, he's in there seeing it, and he goes, "This is unbelievable." It doesn't just affect birds; it affects every one of us. That's a quote, from the presentation. I just listened to it and wrote it all down. Um, so, next point, that the material world is really force fields and probability waves and is a very mysterious world with magical things going on is now known to be relevant, directly relevant to biology. It's not just happening in some realm that has no relationship to our lives and the lives of living things. It's very relevant. And it's also relevant to astrology. Now, here's where I start getting into some, you might say, radical new ideas in astrology. Let's take the earth signs, Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn, that we have assumed anchor us and ground us to terra firma, and everything is born from terra firma. It's like the earth is the foundation. Actually, it's just the opposite. The material world did not come first. Everything is born from higher realms and precipitates downwards. This is not just an idea in metaphysics, it's increasingly an idea in science, in superstring theory and many other theories, and the understanding of quantum fields. There's a quantum field that jiggles in a certain way, and when it jiggles in a certain way, it creates the appearance of what we call physical things. Everything is quantum fields, and they appear differently depending on how they're vibrating in the context that they're in. So there's a oneness from a higher dimensional reality that is everything. There's not such a big difference. So we have this idea of this pyramid where everything is solid and stable, and then we get very etheric and idealistic and spaced out and sacrificing as if sacrifice won't work in the normal world. We have to enter this portal to a different way. And what we're learning from science is everything is really one, and everything is energy. So the earth signs, which is we can think of as a certain kind of vibration, a certain kind of momentum and meaning that are different from air and fire and water. What they actually do, let's read this third paragraph. Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn are signs of transformation that condense energy slash spirit. You can call it energy, you can call it spirit, you can call it higher dimensions, whatever you want to call it. Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn are signs of transformation that condense energy, spirit into things that appear physical to us. Whoa. So this may sound strange because you might say, whoa, 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 whoa. I thought Pluto was a planet of transformation. And in modern Western astrology, maybe eighth house has to do with transformation. You're telling me earth signs, which are supposed to be not transformation, they're supposed to be this basic, stable, safe thing, are transformation? Whoa, David, this doesn't make sense. Well, hold on a second. I think it'll make sense. because things are our spirit manifesting in different ways, and a negative tendency, to read from again second sentence in this third paragraph, a negative tendency, not a necessary fundamental property of earth signs, but a negative tendency of earth signs is to get so attached to what is manifested that they forget where they come from. But this is only a negative tendency and not the essence of these zodiac signs. So when we say, Taurus is so materialistic and Virgo is so picky about little things and Capricorn is so into business and achieving things in the material world, not necessarily. And even more interesting, not even fundamentally. Okay? Because these earth signs are signs of transformation, of magic, where they bring things into that vibratory level that we call earth so that you can experience and engage with them. But in no way does that imply that the earth signs must get dumbed down, that they must lose their contact with spirit, and the only way they can get up to spirit would be to somehow try to fight this kind of heavy gravity that's keeping them down. It's not true. So what's happening is these signs live in the magic of the manifest world, which is spiritual. Everything is spiritual. The problem is with our eyes that we can look down on certain things and call them non-spiritual, but everything is energy. Everything is spirit vibrating in different ways. So I think I've got it down here. Yeah, just skipping ahead a few slides. What we want to do with our diagram is I put red X's through the diagram we had before of the arrows going up. The arrow is actually coming down. So the source is up here and can come down into these different vibrational levels. Or not even down. It's really just appearing in different ways. Now, this is a little bit of an aside, but I want to mention this. I have another YouTube video called Fibonacci Numbers, the Four Elements, Zodiac Sign, Gender, and the Planet Ladder. Whew, that's a long name for a video. Fibonacci Numbers, the Four Elements, Zodiac Sign, Gender, and the Planet Ladder. You can search for that, in YouTube and you'll find it. In that video, I explain how Fibonacci numbers create the zodiac. I actually have a series of videos that explain where these zodiacs come from, where the tropical and sidereal zodiacs come from. They're actually structures in space. Remember I said before that space is 99.99999, however many nines you want to put after it, percent of everything? It's in that space, which is something beyond our limited human mind. It's in that space that is underlying everything where astrology functions. So that old saying that astrology is a spiritual science is true. It's a science that's studying what's happening in the space, in the energy from which everything is born. When the atoms appear and disappear, they're disappearing into some kind of space, we could call it. So when we study how the Fibonacci numbers create the zodiac through these rhythms and cycles and vibrations, you can watch those other videos to learn about it. We find out that fire is vibrating to a frequency of 11. And 11 is fiery. It's moving. It's dynamic. It's restless. It can't sit still. Makes perfect sense. And let me jump down to water. Water vibrates at 7. And in vibrational astrology, we found that 7 makes things quiet and deep. So there's a depth to the emotions of water. Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces, there's something deep, kind of mysterious, because they have a 7 quality. Air has a 9 vibration quality, which makes it communicate and connect with everything all around it. All of that makes sense. But here's the surprise, or it's seemingly surprising, is that Earth is 13. 13, the vibration of transformation and the vibration of being special. Of being special. Because the physical world is very special. 99.99999% is space. If you get in a rocket ship and you fly from Earth to Mars, you're going to be traveling a long time to find Mars. It's like you got on a road in your car and there's nothing around. It's just flat. It's like a desert, just sand everywhere. And you have to go and go and go and go for months, and then finally you find this little thing. Matter, that jiggle that creates force fields, that those force fields can bang up against each other, is so special, so unique. And in matter, our very precious Earth, this little tiny ball relative to everything all around it, all of the mystery and magic, well, maybe not all of it, but a lot of it is living, you might say, inside the matter. Look how we can study anything in our worlds: languages, music, painting, science. It's so complex and rich because all of those infinities are compressed into what we call matter and our precious, special world. So rather than thinking of the physical world as this heavy, dense thing that's weighing me down and keeping me from evolving, and I have to get out of it and get all flighty and weird imagination and whatever to get back to the spirit, spiritual evolution is actually very natural. It's where we came from, and we're always connected to, and is what we are experiencing. Everything is spirit. Now, let me say a few more things. These ideas that I'm introducing into astrology are part of a much larger movement. So in the field of science, there are people like Nassim Haramein, Rupert Sheldrake, Bruce Lipton, Greg Braden, and many others who are scientists and who are showing that science and spirituality are completely consistent. And the nature of science is mystical, spiritual, inspiring. You don't have to even integrate spirituality with science. They're one and the same thing. They're different lenses into the same oneness and wholeness of everything. So what I'm doing in astrology is part of a large movement throughout all of academia and all of culture that's waking up to this. So during historical periods, we will see the same theme occurring, whether it's in music or painting or science. And this is the exciting, beautiful movement that we are in at this time. And so what I'm presenting here is consistent with this way of thinking. Okay, oops, I went the wrong way. And we've already looked at this. Oh, by the way, Einstein's formula E equals mc squared, telling us energy is matter. Okay, a few more ideas, and we'll have enough background information to head into our second video. But a few more things. Another thing about the nature of matter is that infinity is embedded in the finite. This is one of the very, very important concepts in chaos theory and fractal theory. And it appears over and over and over again. Just as one simple example, if you take a circle, like I've got this dark blue ball, and you take the diameter, the distance across, what is the ratio of the diameter, the black line, to the distance around the circle, the perimeter? Probably most of you know that ratio is always 3.14, etc., etc., etc. No matter how large the circle is, you can make it bigger, 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 smaller, smaller, smaller. The ratio is all the same. And that ratio that we call pi is a never-ending decimal. So you see these infinities, never-ending relationship embedded in the simplest shape of a circle. And it shows up many ways with square roots. 4 times 4 is 16, 3 times 3 is 9, 2 times 2 is 4. What number multiplied by itself equals 2? You get a number that's repeating, a never-ending number, which is you have to go to infinity. Anyway, that's just one example. In fractal theory and chaos theory, there are many ways that we see infinity embedded in the finite. And this is an idea in chemistry, it's an idea in mathematics, it's an idea in religion, that infinity is embedded in the finite. The finite and the infinite are actually never separated. The finite is really, you can take a ruler and measure, 1 meter or 1 foot. That's a finite thing. Yeah, it's a kind of magic that we can create the finite out of the infinite. So an example from spirituality in Paramahansa Yogananda's book of chants called Cosmic Chants, there's one song, the words are, "Thou and I are never apart, wave of the sea, dissolve in the sea, I am the bubble, make me the sea." So the idea is consistent through all areas of life. And one of the beautiful, liberating things that happens from understanding this is you don't have to get out of the material world. The material world is already a spiritual world. The finite is a joyful expression of the infinite. Earth signs are not finite and limited. They are cauldrons of transmutation and transfiguration. Now, if everything is spiritual and the infinite is everywhere, then why is Taurus so bound to the world of senses, Virgo so fixated on trivial details, and Capricorn so dry, practical, and business-oriented? The answer is because we focus on these particular expressions of the zodiac signs. We pick these negative tendencies from earth signs can have a negative tendency. Everything in astrology has positive and negative potentials. Negative potential of earth signs is they do get so immersed in the transfiguration process, they kind of forget the whole process, and they're just, they're just lost in what they've transfigured themselves into. So the answer is because we focus on these particular expressions of these zodiac signs. The implied lack of spiritual awareness in the zodiac signs is actually a negative expression of signs. So let's look at Virgo, just as one example real quickly. I have a video on each one of the 12 signs. And think about Virgo. Is Virgo so lost to what is uplifting, to what will raise us, to what will help us grow and be more harmonious and more beautiful and more pure? Well, think about a specific problem. Think about, as I make this video in the year 2020, we're having this pandemic with the COVID-19 illness. It has traveled around the world. Who's going to save us from this disease and death? Well, one of the things that's going to help and is helping dramatically are the people who study the details, who even know that it's caused by a virus. And what is a virus? And people built microscopes and laboratories, and they get in there and they're studying all of the never-ending details of spirit vibrating at the level of this very special physical world. So Virgo is that kind of analysis and detail is one of the essential things to solving many problems. And is that just because we're stuck in the material world and we need material tools to get out of it? No, it's because this is the infinite, evolving and expressing and transforming, transfiguring itself into these vibrations that we call the material world. It's a magical journey. So it is a spiritual process. Okay. And I mentioned here the Theosophists and Max Heindel, for example, or the astrologers of the early 20th century, they completely disagreed with what I'm telling you. They said, they called, the earth signs kind of brutal and material and all this stuff. So we're getting a more advanced understanding as time goes on. Okay, let's go on to this graph. This is a graph of 2,578 people classified as involved in spiritual, psychic, or religious activities. Also paranormal and psychic events like out-of-body experiences, UFO sightings. These events and activities and people born at these times who are so far removed from the physical, and they're all connected and excited and involved in these mystical kinds of things. Does Pisces show up? Well, here are their sun signs, and here's Pisces on the graph. It's about average. Virgo ends up being fairly high. So there's no correspondence of what we might anticipate. So some people are confused that ideas seem to work with our clients, but then you do the research and they don't work. Well, I'm going to suggest to you the reason they're not working with the reason they seem to be working with your clients is because we're bringing out a certain understanding on the situation and overlooking the exceptions to the rule. So the Pisces is really not more spiritual than the other signs. They're all equally spiritual in different ways. And I could produce a graph of planets and houses and so on. You would get similar kinds of results. So this is the end of part one. What am I into here? 43 minutes. I try to keep the videos to about a half hour, but to cover this took a little longer than I thought it would. That's a background to where we're headed, and in the next video in this series, we'll move forward with our understanding. By the third video, we will be getting into the details of exactly what's going on. So this is just some information about vibrational astrology, and the ideas I'm presenting here are part of vibrational astrology. You have, of course, my YouTube videos, of which this is one. We have an annual vibrational astrology conference every March in Gainesville, Florida. So if you want to know about the vibrational astrology conference, you can go to astrosoftware.com, go over here to conference in the menu bar at the top, and then whatever year it is, there'll be information on the next one. So here's the next one. As I'm making this in summer of 2020, it will be the conference in 2021, March 5 through 7. If the coronavirus problems subside, we will have it live, but it will also be online. So if we have it live, it'll be live and online. If we can't do it live, it'll only be online, and these are some of the speakers. And lastly, let me just mention that if you want to take classes, you can study vibrational astrology with me at AvalonAstrology.com, with Linda Berry at AstroSleuth.com, with Clarissa Dolphin at SiderealSoul.com, and possibly other people will start, definitely other people will be starting classes at some time as well. So that's it for now, my friends. We will continue with this in part 2. Thank you very much for watching this video. God bless. Namaste.